Alright, we have today our YTAC C++. This is our 5th week in C++, and I wanted to continue with the trend of applying the code. So last week we had our hotel calculation for an amount of nights, and this week we're going to have something a little different, a little more in tune with what you might see perhaps if you're making a game. Gonna be not going into Unreal Engine, but still gonna be having some things that you could use theoretically if you wanted to. So, what for this week, I'm actually going to walk through my demo version of a a turn-based fighting game, and I will kind of give like the first half of the solution, and then you just have to do the other half of it. So right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and delete that hello world that we already get. And I'm going to include another package. And this is stdlib.h. And I'll go into what that does a little later. And then we're going to use the namespace std that's for our inputs and our outputs. But for right now, what I'm thinking for at least my example, you can go into this however you'd like to. For my example, what I want this to happen is that you are a wizard who is choosing a spell. I'm going to have 4 elements, and I'm going to have some values that the user will receive, and also the user will input. So I'm going to have my elements, and the first thing I want to do is establish my strings, and I'm going to have an element, and that'll be what the user inputs. I'm going to have my 4 different elements here. I'm just gonna do these guys. I'm gonna get my integers. So I want to be able to have it a little bit more interactive than just picking the elements. So I'm also gonna have a couple of variables for this. I'm going to have a stamina, so however much energy it will drain, which I'm also going to have an intensity, which will be based on how much the user inputs, how intense they want the spell to be, and then that will use more or less stamina. Going to have health points for the enemy, damage done, and then exhaust and turn. Damage and exhaust are just essentially the reciprocal of intensity and health, or sorry, stamina and health. So the health remaining is the health beginning minus the damage. So it just makes it a little bit easier for these turn events that we're gonna have. Next, I wanted to get just a double, and this will determine the effectiveness. If you can think like Pokemon, different typings are stronger or weaker against different other types. So for this case, I'm not going to have very complex. I'm mostly going to focus on this little demo here on the player themselves. So what your user interface would look like and what you would see. What I'm not going to cover is getting the elements for an enemy or an enemy counterattack or that kind of thing. But the first thing I want to do is I want to get some values in for some of these variables. The first one I want to do is stamina is equal to 100, and I'm also going to do health equals 100 and turn equals 1. We're going to start 100% stamina, 100% health, and we're beginning on the first turn, not the 0th turn. So we have our setup done right here. And what I'm going to go into is now what the user will see as they begin. So see out, and then I'm just going to give it a message. You have however much stamina. All right. 1 second. I think my Oh, I apologies. Just had something off in the live class. All right. So, back to it. For you guys in the recording. So we have our values here that we're going to go with. And we have our stamina. And then I'm going to label this so you have that much stamina. And your enemy has health, that variable name. And then we want to describe it, health remaining. And then I'm going to end line at the end of that. So basically, what you would see is it would output you have 100 stamina and your enemy has 100 health remaining. That's all we really want. And for right now, this will be going through, and every time we would kind of figure out how much. This is our starting baseline. I'm going to start up here, and there are multiple ways you can do this, but I'm going to use a while loop, and this will be the primary objective determination right here. And this is going to be when the health of my enemy is above 0, which we're going to have our curly bracket while we're inside this while loop. So the whole point of this code is that when you're dealing your damage, it'll run through and proceed to the next turn. If you've already killed the enemy and gone below that 0 health threshold, or at that 0 health threshold, that it will end, and then it will tell you that you defeated the enemy. So in this, I'm going to have another conditional here. I want to have an if statement. And if you think about what we're doing, we want to make sure that before we determine if we're going to attack, that we have enough stamina to attack. So I want to make sure that health is above 0 and that stamina is above 0. And from this point now, we can determine the elements that we're using and that kind of stuff. So the first thing I want to do after we're in this if statement, this is if the user can in fact attack. I want to prompt the user to select one element of the spell. And we have fire, water, thunder, and frost. And I'll just leave that with a little bit of space left over. And have my two less than signs and line. I'm going to kind of expand this so we have a little more room to see this. So now this will just simply read out just this string of text, and then it'll take our input, which we are going to use the input cin, and this we're going to store this as our element variable. There are better ways to do this, but this is how I wanted to do it, so that it kind of shows the 4 available elements, and is I think probably the easiest way, not necessarily the simplest way. So we're going to have a couple if statements here to determine what element was used. So we're going to say if element equals equals, which is saying if it matches fire, then we want to set fire equal to the element, which is kind of a roundabout way to do this, but I'm also going to set the effectiveness variable, and we'll say if they choose fire, it'll have a 1.0 multiplier to it. So we can close this if loop, or if conditional, and then we're just going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to copy and paste this for water, thunder, and frost. I realized, yeah, that's just kind of forgot to put in the else before these when I copy pasted. So, oops, this is, yep. So, have our else if here because I just kind of copied this, forgot to add that in. But now we have our 4 options. So if they choose fire, else if they choose water, else if thunder, else if frost. And then I'm going to add an else to the end of this. And this is just going to determine what other possibility could it be. We'll just say, for example, a typo, or they typed an unknown spell. So to kind of keep it into the character of the game, not to break that immersion, we're going to say you don't know any spell called. And then we're going to call on that element. And then we'll just take our quote here. Try again. And then what we're going to do is, actually, forgot to add the end L to the end of this line. Semicolon, and then we're going to use a function called abort. And this abort function is why we use this stdlibh, because this is what's going to, if they put in a wrong spell, it'll just kill the program and then they'll have to restart. But that's it for the element decision and how we're establishing that. Next step we want to do is determine what the user wants the intensity to be, this second variable up here. So I'm going to just have the same thing that we did up here. I'm just going to copy it and paste it, and then I realized I had an element here. Select one element. So we're going to say select the intensity of the spell. And then we'll just say 1 to 10, 10 being the highest. And then right here on our input, we want this to be our intensity function, variable, excuse me. So now we have what the intensity is, how much stamina we have, if they can attack, and this will determine now how much damage it will do. And how much damage it will do will help us know how much health is remaining. And also, because we know the intensity and we know how much starting stamina, we can determine the exhaust and resulting stamina. So this is where we're going to get into a little bit more calculations and less just naming and getting inputs. So I want to first determine my exhaust rate. So I'm just going to say that exhaust is the intensity of the spell, and then we'll just say times 5. So if I said I want it to have an intensity of 10, it would cost 50 stamina. Next what we want to do is do stamina equals stamina minus exhaust. If you wanted to, you could just do stamina minus equals exhaust, and it's the exact same thing. And then we're going to have an if statement here. So we don't want our stamina to be negative. And so we have right here determining this is if the stamina is above 0, then we attack. So if we have, this is one of the simpler ways that I did it in my method. But if we say that we want to use 30 stamina, but we only have 20, well, I'll just say that you can use the spell for that, however much you have remaining, and then I'm going to, after that, set the stamina equal to 0, so that way it doesn't go into the negative values. So that's it for the calculations based on the stamina remaining based on the intensity of the spell. So we're going to determine the damage now, which is based on the intensity, and we'll just say intensity times, we want it to scale linearly, at least in this example with it. So we'll say times 4 times the effectiveness, which I'm realizing now I forgot to change these values. So we'll say that for this particular example, water is not super effective against this opponent, so we'll say 0.75. Thunder is very effective, 1.5, and then frost is not as effective as thunder. So now we have some actual values. You can see some differences in the type of spell you choose. So we have now our calculation for the damage is done right here, and we just need to change how much health is done. So if we did, our health value will change. Similar example to this stamina and exhaust. Actually, it's pretty much identical except with the different variables. And then the same thing we want to have our, well, actually, we don't even need to worry about if the health goes below 0 because this while loop will catch it. But actually, well, we'll go ahead and have this if health is less than 0, and that way we can make it a little bit easier to call on it later. And I think it's a good practice to keep your integer values that should not be negative, keep them positive. So that is it for our damage and health calculations. I'll write some notes here. Damage HP calculations, and then we have our, up here, the exhaust / stamina calculations, and that should kind of easily section this off for us. So now we're going to come over here, and what we need to do is now tell the user the results, right? So we know how much damage they did, we know how much stamina they used, how much health is remaining, how much stamina is remaining. So what I'm going to do here is say cout, and then u delt. I want to make sure that we have that space there just so it's formatted nicely. So you did damage, but lost. And we'll just go here to exhaust. Stamina. Your enemy has, this is just a little bit of tedious typing here. How much health, hit points remaining, we'll just say. I think that's all we need for this results, so we can end the line here. So now if we read this for the moment, we could say you dealt 0 damage and lost 0 stamina. Your enemy has 100 health points remaining. So that's pretty much all that we need to know from this engagement. And the last thing we want to do inside of this big if statement, whether we have stamina, is add 1 point to the turn. So we can just say turn plus equals 1, and we can go ahead and tell or output to the user what turn it is. We'll just go ahead and use the similar colon right here, and then we'll give it the turn number right here, and then end line. So right now, what we have going here is, I'll go right from the top. We're outputting the questions for our spell and element. We're giving them the information to start with that they know, and then they're selecting the element based on this, which determines the effectiveness. The effectiveness and the intensity are used to determine how much stamina and how much damage are going to be, I guess how much exhaust and how much damage are going to be done from that turn. So we are now officially done with this very large if statement. So what I'm going to do is come down to this bracket, which is their if, and we can come down here, and we're going to get an else. So if the stamina is not above 0, then this condition is basically saying that the user does not have stamina. So we'll just make sure that they automatically rest for that turn. So you are out of stamina. Wait 1 turn to regain. We'll just let them know. We'll just say 30 stamina. That way it's enough to actually get a bigger spell, regardless of it. But one issue here is that you're sure to run out of stamina. So what I'm actually going to do real fast is I'm going to come back up here to the end after the stamina calculations have been made. Come up here to this results. These are the results. And then I'm going to add, we'll say arbitrary number, 10 points of stamina back. So after a turn, if you've used 50 stamina, by the end of the turn, you would have net negative 40 stamina because you would get that 10 back. So, and we might as well let them know that they lost this stamina. So we can just do the same thing with a C out. You regained 10 stamina points. And we'll just let them know how much they have remaining. And then this is the last output for any given turn, excuse me. So I'm actually going to end line, end line. I want to have 2-line gap in between. So I'll go ahead and finish this line because there's currently an error on this, but then after that I do want to test this first if statement. All we need for this is actually to finish that line. Might as well finish the else. So basically we're saying you don't have enough stamina, you're going to wait, so because you're just resting, we'll give back 30 stamina. Why not? Feeling generous today. And then we also want to add our +1 to the turn counter. And then we can take, probably should just copy that, but we can do that now. So now that will tell us if we do not have over 0 stamina, it'll let us know that we are out of stamina. We have to regain our 30 stamina by waiting a turn, adds our value to our stamina, adds 1 to the turn, and then it'll output the turn. So if we run this code, we are told we have our stamina, select the element. We'll say I want to do fire and want the intensity to be 8. So it instantly tells us we deal 32 damage but lost 40 stamina. So this is going to keep looping while the health is greater than 0. If I run out of stamina and I rebuild my stamina, that's perfectly fine. So let's just say, alright, well this time fire didn't finish it. We'll say I want to do thunder and I want to do all out. I get 10 intensity. So dealt 60 damage, but I lost 50% or 50 stamina. Only 8 hit points left, so I shouldn't need much, but then I have 30 stamina total. So next I can say here is let's just try frost, and I'll do stamina or intensity of 4 because guy's almost down. 20 damage, lost 20 stamina, 0 hit points remaining. This is why I went back and made this right here, because that would have said your enemy has negative 12 hit points remaining, which isn't very accurate, and that's one of those things that can break immersion. Not that this is a super immersive game, but getting clean values and returns are very nice. So, what I want to do now is, well, it kind of just kept saying what the turn was. So, I am not going to actually, this is a very anticlimactic ending to this clearly very epic battle. So, we are currently out, we've broken through the while loop. The health has has gone below 0. So we're going to come down here, and we are now outside of it. And I just want to say a quick little, output here. And we'll just quickly say you defeated the enemy. And I think that's all that we can do, all we need to do to finish it. And we'll go ahead and line at the end of that. So this happens now if the health is less than 0. So if we can run this again, we can kind of see that we have this completed project. I know I took a longer time walking through this example, but I do think it's important to understand what exactly I'm asking for, because it's not always clear. With these current values, it's very linear, and just hit as hard as you can every time and you'll win very quickly. So you shouldn't take more than 3 turns most of the time, but you can change this how you want and introduce some random elements, perhaps critical hits, as well as enemies attacking you or a turn limit perhaps, time limit even if you have just like regular ticks. But I do want to leave this open for some creative freedom because it's not always available, especially with programming assignments, that you can take this into the more right-brained side of things. So I know that was a longer recording and a longer class today, but I am looking forward to seeing what you guys can produce. And thanks for stopping by.